pretty long story behind this car, because I've owned it since May 2005. So that's more than 19 years. And it's a 90-year model, sold new Swedish car. You who knows about BX can immediately see what this is. And you who doesn't is not into BX that much. Anyway, explain that later. I bought this 19 years ago, used this as a daily drive, because I have owned a lot of BX wagons through the years. And this was actually my last one. Then I started to buy XM wagons, diesels. This is not a diesel. And I used it for 2 years. And then the typical thing with these cars, this particular model, happened. I show you. The thing with this car is that it is a four-wheel drive. I think in France and other countries it's 4x4, 4x4. But by some strange reason they choose to call them four-wheel drive here in Sweden. That's probably because that's more English or international or something. The thing with these cars are they have a transfer box that is put on the usual ordinary gearbox, and it then, as it says, transfers the traction through a propeller shaft and down to the rear axle. And these transfer boxes are well known to break down. And I don't know, but I've seen signs that this car has had its transfer box changed at least one time before I bought it. As I said, I used it for like 2 years, and then the transfer box broke down. And what was actually really strange, I managed to find a used good one. So I bought that, I think 2007, I think it was. And I changed it. Took me an entire weekend, because getting this big clumsy lump of steel out of the engine compartment of a BX, yeah, that was a lot of swearing. So I changed it, and then something else happened, and I parked the car. And I suppose that was in 2007. And then it sat for years outside. Big no. Sat for, I think, 3 years outside until 2010 or 9. Doesn't matter, who cares? Then I managed to move it inside. The garage I had then, when I lived in more close to the big town, before I moved out in the forest, was a really nice garage. It was always good temperature. It was like inside your house, 20 degrees, 22 degrees, no humidity, nothing. And it sat there for, well, I think 8 years. And of course, sitting in that environment doesn't affect the car's rust status. It's just, everything is just paused. So the car was literally the same shape as when I parked it in that garage, when I took it here, brought it here, where I live now, in 2017. Then I parked it outside again for, I think, 3 years. I think it was in 2020. I parked it behind my sliding door garage, or inside the sliding door garage. But that's not like here. It's still outside, humidity and stuff, even if it's a roof there. And there it sat until last week. And the story is that when it sat outside here, when I brought it here, I started it up, I drove it back and forth here some sometimes just to make sure everything worked, and it did. Uh, then I checked the oil level in the transfer box and it was empty. And I couldn't remember. Of course, I must have filled it up when I changed it. And I saw the big stain of oil underneath the car. Okay, it's leaking. The transfer box I bought was, according to the seller, it was refurbished. I don't know, but it was very clean. It had been cleaned, the outside, and I saw this blue remains of gasket sealant stuff on it. Later I figured out that was probably blue Hulomar, and that's not a gasket, it's a gasket glue. You use it to get the gasket to stick at the surface where you want to put it, so it doesn't fall down again. It's a gasket glue, it's not a gasket. They probably use that. It would work. It will leak. Okay, so I was a bit. I drove the car back and forward without oil, but there's always a thin film of oil on every surface anyway. So it's set for like 3 years outside here, all year round, and I felt pretty sorry for the car because I like this car. There is a reason it's still around with me, because this is my BX. I can't imagine getting rid of this car. I actually like this car a lot. Because this is the ultimate BX. The BX Wagon itself, even if it's just an ordinary wagon, front wheel drive, doesn't matter. It's a superb car. Road holding, comfort, inner space, everything, how you sit, how you drive. That's the most, in my opinion, the best Citroën, mid-class Citroën they have ever built after the GSA, which I like, air-cooled engine and everything. But this is the modern version of something never seen before. I was sitting on the Swedish version of Le Bon Coin. It's called Blocket. Just surfing, Citroën surfing. See if there was any nice ads for cars for sale. And I was just, I wasn't looking that much for a BX again, because I had already started to look at XM wagons. But I clicked on an ad which just said Citroën BX wagon. That's it. BX19 wagon, it said. And I could as well not care, but by some reason I clicked on that text, and up came this, a picture of this. So it didn't say in the ad, the first you saw, it wasn't anything about being a four-wheel drive, and I just sat there and wow. And that was like 300 kilometers from where I lived. The money was nothing, it was cheap, it was MOT, it was just a working car. You sit there, turn key, just go. So I called the seller, the car was still there, let me go and check it. So I came the next weekend, looked at the car, it was just fine. And we came to agreement of a price that was really good, really nice price. And next weekend I picked it up, and I had it since. That's the story. Back to 2020, when I was going to put the car from being outside into the storage behind the sliding door. It didn't move. And of course, 4 disc brakes being rusty, sitting outside all year round, of course doesn't work, it doesn't move. So I jacked it up, fixed all the wire wheel, all the discs and everything, put it down, didn't want to move. And I started to think, what is this? And I had in the back of my mind this transfer box with no oil in it. So I was starting to be a bit nervous. And that's the backside of knowing things about car. The more you know, the more neurotic you get, because you know what can go wrong, what can fail. It was possible to move the car by starting it and drive it, but as first thing that happened when you press down the clutch, it just stopped. So, okay, I put it in the storage behind the sliding door, sat there for some years, and I had this in the back of my mind. I want to keep this BX. I don't want it to fail. I don't want this. I can't find another transfer box. I still have the old transfer box, which I replaced, but I don't know how to fix that. It's complicated. Last week, I made a decision. Okay, am I gonna save this car? If yes, then I have to put it inside the shop and start doing something with it. Otherwise, it can't just sit there. I have to get rid of it. But that is more or less out of the question. This is my BX, and I want to have this till I die, actually, if it's possible. So the struggle began, dragging it out of there. I couldn't start it now because there is something with the gas, not something. So I popped all the spark plugs and drove it in gear with the starter slowly. And it worked, but it's so slow and it's such a resistance somewhere in the drivetrain. It just resists. I wasn't happy. I managed to get the car in the garage. I used my poor DS station wagon. I have probably shortened the life of the clutch on the DS wagon with some good 10,000 kilometers with this, because the BX didn't want to move. Managed to get it into the shop, and here it is. And it's a pretty familiar sight to see a Citroën at my place on its face with the rear up in the air and the subframe sitting beside. We have seen that before. So here we are with another Citroën sitting on its face in the garage with the rear in the air on axle stands and the subframe sitting beside. And I spent an entire evening getting the drivetrain out of the subframe, because when I took the propeller shaft out of the differential, I noticed that when everything was up in the air and it wasn't any longer connected with the front of the drivetrain, because the prop shaft was disconnected, I could move one wheel completely freely. It wasn't any resistance at all. And the other wheel was and that's the other thing with this car. I don't know if you can see it from there, but on the hatch here it says ABS. It's an ABS car. And those BXs 4-wheel drives that had the ABS system, they had another rear differential. They had a Torsen differential. Torsen is short for torque sensitive. That means that when you have a ordinary differential, you have one wheel sitting on ice, for example, make it very clear, and another wheel sitting on good friction. What's going to happen? The traction will be where it's easiest. So the wheel on the ice is going to spin, but the other wheel that needs the traction is just going to sit there still, and you're stuck. But the torque sensitive differential works the way that before you even feel that it starts to spin, it locks, and back goes the traction. I have tried to understand how that works, because there is no electronics involved. There is no like what you call it, viscose clutches and stuff. No, it's only cogwheels. It's only it's just analog, everything. And I haven't dig into it that much yet, so I don't actually understand 100% how it works, just how it behaves. And I was thinking, okay, is the torsion diff failed? But how can it just fail by sitting there outside? I don't know. So one wheel wasn't turning; it was just turning in the what I felt, the play in the drive shaft. That was what I felt, and the other wheel was just totally loose. Must be something wrong in there. Something has just broken off in there. Then I took the drive shaft and the rear suspension arm. On that side I was blocked and stuck. Took it apart. And in here sits the wheel bearing. Here's the hub. Here's the wheel side. And the bearing sits in there. Imagine my relief when I discovered that it was the wheel bearing that was so rusted, so it was totally blocked. The whole time it was a wheel bearing locking everything up. And since it's a four-wheel drive, everything is just mechanics, it locks everything. So, and that wheel bearing looked like something I've just found on the bottom of the ocean. It's not logic for a closed thing, like a differential, to get bad just by sitting outside, because it's in oil. What can happen? It's more likely to have like a wheel bearing or something that sits a little bit more outside and it's more exposed to the humid air to fail, and that's what happened. Since I didn't know, I was almost sleepless some nights here. It's a differential. So it wasn't my first suspicion, the transfer box. Yeah. So what we're gonna do now? Well, same shit as usual. Same old shit. We're gonna strip this from everything. Oops. I've already taken the suspension arms and stuff away here, and I'm gonna show you a little bit more here in a second how it's constructed, because it's a really rare and pretty awkward construction just to get everything to work in the rear. Enough of talking, let's have a look at it. So on a normal Citroën subframe, you have the what's this? A lot of crap here, we need to clean this up. You have the suspension arm going like this, up and down. You have the wheel here, and you have the suspension cylinder sitting here, and you have the suspension spear sitting here. and it's just sitting in the open and everything is open around here. But in this case, you have a drive shaft coming through here that pivots up and down. So you can't have a suspension spear there. It's impossible. But you still need to have the suspension cylinder there. So how do you solve that little problem? Well, Citroën solved it this way. This is a connection, hydraulic connection, that sits on the end of the suspension cylinder in here. And it just moves the fluid to the sphere that is sitting upside down here on this transversal arm here. And in there is the shock absorber. So you don't have any shock absorber on the actual sphere. That is actually accumulator sphere. It's open in there. There is nothing. It's just like an accumulator. So you have one at each side sitting there. So that's a very special setup. The sphere itself is sitting like this. And yeah. There is no way we can just have things breaking down in this project and then just go buy something at the scrapyard, because these parts are extinct today. So that's one issue. The other issue is that the stuff here looks like it came from the ocean, came from a shipwreck sitting since the 50s. But the construction of the subframe is actually pretty simple compared to the gears. So on here we have the front. This is the front fastening, and here sits the rear fastenings. And these always break, so they won't work. Every four-wheel drive BX has got this issue of when you jack up the car, this isn't connected to the body. So the whole thing is just going down like this and hanging in the front fasteners. So we're gonna solve that problem some way. I have an idea, but I don't know if it works yet. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. The thing is, you see how rusty it is. Every little screw has to be prepared before we even try to turn it. Because if it snaps, we don't have the parts. On the other side, many of these screws and fasteners are just standard M8 screws, with one little exception. Let's see if I can reach over here for the hub. Remember, this was the hub that houses the wheel bearing. And you see, these are Allen screws. And these are sitting tight, or were sitting tight. And what happens when you have a rusty Allen head bolt is that it lacks a bit of material in here and it's full of rust. So you have to clean it very, very tedious. And then you have to hammer in this in this case it's an 8mm Allen. But if this is sitting extremely tight, it's just gonna go around. It's just gonna turn around in there. These 4 Allen screws took me over an hour to get loose. I think more than that. This was the side with the stock bearing. It's probably a factory bearing, never changed. The other side actually had a changed bearing. Sometimes before sometime in the car's history before I bought a car, they changed a wheel bearing, and that shop has used just ordinary M8 bolts with an ordinary civilized head, 6-corner head. So that was piece of cake getting that one unstuck. The propeller shaft has a mix of Allen screws and torque screws. So the torque screws were sitting on the prop shaft mounting on the rear differential, and these were okay to get loose. It worked. The other ones, I don't know if I can get them unstuck. I'm gonna try, but at least I got this stuff taken apart. So we have some work to do here. Let's see if I can get another hydraulic block unstuck, like that one I showed you, with the spear. It was sitting here with these 3 M8s. I have 3 other M8s to loosen up there. That's one issue. I don't know how that's gonna turn out. And then I have the other of these. Once upon a time, when I had this car as a daily drive, I actually changed one of the hydraulic cylinders, and I made this tool to handle this big thing there. So I have actually, this is just a usual socket, which I have filed totally flat, so it has grip all the way out. Then I have, as I can see here, because I don't remember, but I can see what I've done here. I've used the track from a wheel bearing, welded it on here, and this is actually a shaft from an old spanner. Drop forged steel, it says 17. And I had it sitting in a box, so I could just use it for that one, but we have the other one, and that's not been loosened, because that's not the one I changed in, well, what should we think, 2006? Time flies. Let's get to work. I've removed the oh, where's my, there. I removed this strange connection here with this thick hydraulic pipe, and before we can remove the cylinder, the actual cylinder, we need to get this unstuck, because there is a strange metal plate sitting here and kind of, I don't know, kind of fixing it. It looks like that. And it removes, see if I can have a proper tool here somewhere. Sorry for the bad camera, but I'm crawling around on the floor right now. Let's see here. I just want to film this because this is so intricate. I think you can see the actual little hook there. And what we need to do is just unhook it. Let's see if I can do that even. I'm holding a camera at the same time, trying to do this left-handed, but I'm a right-handed person, so this is just gonna unhook there. Yeah, this is going great, guys. Oh, yeah. Sorry for this roller coaster. Where's the pliers? There. And now this strange spring-looking thing is actually loosened. We should be able to remove the spring thing. Imagine just figuring out this shape of a spring. Oh my gosh, let's see. Then we have a, there you can see the whole plate assembly. I just want to get this removed. There we go. There it is. It is pretty funny that they still use M7 bolts on some parts, but the explanation is that this port is the same port that sits on a Citroën GS from 1970. So 20 years later they haven't changed the housing. That's why you have M7 bolts and you have 11mm heads. I think we're going to change this one to I have new old stock sitting in boxes, so we could as well just change that. That's a very minor issue compared to what we have to deal with here on this project. Oh my gosh. After sitting for 35 years, these are surprisingly easy to get loose, and they must have been in a almost airtight environment in here, because look at that, the yellow plating is still there. If you have ever worked with a Citroën XM front subframe, you have probably noticed that there is a aluminum console underneath the car each side. I think it was for the sway bar. I don't remember actually, but they just rotate and they break. So it's a nightmare to fix them. I was pretty scared to loosen these ones up. I managed to loosen them up, but you see, these are just hammered in there with some kind of almost looking like a Torx thing in there. They could as well just strip everything and just rotate, and then you're just done. So for being this crappy, things has actually loosened up very nicely. Let's see if this one can be loosened up effortlessly. A little tip here, always wire brush surfaces, always. There is no use to put WD-40 on stuff if it isn't cleaned. I'm just gonna put some little on there. I normally don't care about WD-40 unless I just wanted to. Let's see, this is 19. Oh, that's 18. But it wasn't clean, as I said. Let's see how this works. Yep. Should have have a ratchet here, but it's coming so nicely. Beautiful. So the plan is to have the entire subframe totally stripped from everything, so I can clean it, rust-wise clean it, and then I want to paint it, and then we can put things together again, little by little, after fixing all the stuff. This was also pretty okay, actually. It's done. We have actually a completely stripped subframe.